is not from the past, it's not from the future, it doesn't even seem to be from the present. They're just timeless. And they're a little bit modern, and they're a little old-fashioned at the same time, so they kind of exist in this limbo. You know, so they're not old and tiny, and they're not modern, they're nowhere. And I think people really like that. They enjoy that. I do. I'm glad they're a little bit hard to place. I feel like the Cheshire Cat every year when I go to the opening. The pictures are more beautiful than they ever were. The success is overwhelming financially. The fact that I'm able to support myself through these pictures is a miracle.
Tonight before the gallery opened its doors, I guess we'd sold about 65 prints, which is quite amazing. It's what any artist hopes to do over a several-year period.
This is my 38th or 39th show in 6 years, worldwide. I'm in museums, I'm in collections, people writing essays about me, books are coming out everywhere.
I mean, he's really up there with the important photographers. And it's unusual, it's surprising, because it's old-fashioned, the technique. There's nothing cutting edge about it. It appeals to everybody, gay, straight, old, young, rich and poor. I mean, it's cut across every single line, to men and women. He somehow finds that connection to people.
Mom, it's a classic. People are out of their mind about it.
I know, it's beautiful.
People are saying it looks like a painting from the Renaissance.
Oh my God.
Thank you for doing that for me and for coming. You don't know what it means to me.
It's not just a picture of Rose, my mother, it's a picture of everyone's mother. When she got to see it in the show, she was taken aback a little bit, like we all are when we see photographs of ourselves. But I was able to convince her right away that it was a picture that people were responding to in a way that was bringing up motherhood for everyone.
The work and the progression of the work registers as kind of a miraculous visual manifestation of what's going on inside his mind, heart, and soul.
I wonder a lot. I think, wow, would this be happening if my sight didn't change? And then I think, well, that's a stupid question because that's not what happened. You know, this is my story. Life's Evening Hour, a universal tale of triumph over adversity.
It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. John Dugdale. Mr. Dugdale is a commercial photographer who began taking photos with a more personal bent after he was diagnosed with HIV and began losing his vision. He's here tonight to discuss his latest work. Please join me in welcoming John Dugdale.
Thank you all so for coming. It's always so wonderful to give these talks since I can't see anyone. I'm never nervous anymore.
One of the astounding things that I realized right away the first year I started traveling with my work, when I would speak about what happened to me, they didn't see me as a gay person with an HIV story. They saw me as a person who had a stroke and lost their sight, but somehow they had the gumption to continue to do what he loved to do.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. So nice to see you both.
Thank you.
You know, I'd have old women coming up to me afterwards and saying, I had a stroke, but I'm going to go home and take up my knitting again. I am so not alone. There are people like me all over the country, all over the world, that show that the human spirit is really almost unbreakable. I don't think that the type of religion is important. It's truly just a belief in something or someone stronger. And I never felt like I was alone in the hospital. I felt like I had all the great teachers of the world with me while I was there. I never felt by myself, and that really helped give me a lot of strength because some of the scariest stuff happened while I was alone. I can't believe I'm still here. I was so ready to leave. It's amazing that I'm still here. A lot of gruesome things happened to me in the hospital that were disgusting. You know, like people cutting my eyes open and trying to insert things in my chest for medicine and having IVs in each arm for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and people dying in the room with me over and over again over the course of that time, because before the cocktail, people died. They came in the hospital very sick and died. And I saw a million things, and this is the way I didn't go insane. This is the way I didn't become angry. These really extracted all of that stuff that people wondered about. They extracted it out of me like a sponge, because I knew I had this secret way to translate it into something beautiful and something that would give me money to continue my life. The pictures came alive, and I got such a jolt. It was so profoundly powerful that it actually, I believe, is what halted my CMV retinitis, the disease that scarred my retinas. My experience with it up until that time, which is about 10 years of watching people get sick and die, is that CMV retinitis was something that was the end stage of AIDS. You'd hear your friends talking about someone slipping away and say, well, then he went blind and died.
That's when it hit home with me, I think, more than anything. And I realized, you know, how fleeting life is, and we are, and, you know, even though I knew he was tough, he's a survivor. Some things are out of our control.
If I was to have thought too much about any of the things that happened to me over the past 7 years, I probably wouldn't be here. One bout of pneumonia would have been enough to kill anyone. And the stroke, the CMV, the various blood-borne illnesses that I had, any one of them could have killed anyone in a week. So I didn't think too much further beyond each one, and here I am.
I think that family is something, one of the only things that you have in this world, and I think that it was a very important part of him pulling through.
I do have to credit my mom for that, because fundamentally she always made sure that we were close. I guess it helps that we all really do like each other, which is different than loving somebody, and it's just followed us along through to our adulthood.
She allowed me complete freedom to be who I wanted to be from day one. When I was 10, she said, what do you want for your birthday? And I said, I want to go to every antique store we can find. And she said, fine. There was no question, like, don't you want to go play baseball? What do you mean you want to go to an antique store? She found every antique store we could, and with my meager budget, I went and bought things. It really gave me confidence, and still, that I can do anything that I want.
I would love to show you, from the very first moment that he started taking pictures, I have everything. Very first one. Do you remember these, John?
I sure do.
Now, I've done this with all my children, everything that they've done.
I remember when I was in the hospital, and my brother and sister and mother were standing around the hospital bed, and they looked so sad. They said, oh, we were so enthusiastic about your career, speaking about it in the past tense. I said, I'm going to continue to take pictures. I'll be the most famous low vision or blind photographer in the country. And they looked at me astounded, and when they left, I was like, oh, dear God, what did I just say?
What's great about John is that he's still able to express himself. I mean, this is his dream. This is what he always wanted to do. And in Spanish, we have a saying, it says, no hay mal que por bien no venga, which means that out of something bad, always something good comes out of it. And you know, this is what he always wanted to do. I mean, I don't think that he ever enjoyed doing fashion that much.
There's a very clear difference between what I was doing before I was sick and what I did afterwards with my photography. My photography after my illness was like a lifesaver, like a preserver that I threw to myself. Before that, it was a way to pay my mortgage, something I had to do. It was an act that I did to make the beautiful flower picture, please the client, really act interested, but deep down not care. The nudes that I did earlier were about sexual attraction, and the nudes that I did afterwards were about the beauty of the human figure in its health or not health or whatever. The body, every part of it, from top to bottom, front, back, and center, to me is a beautiful part of the casing of your spirit. And before, it was a sexual object. that I thought was wonderful and fun to get on a piece of film.
The ideas and then what he's portraying, they're often his friends, his family, but they're things that are important to him.
Pictures I like are probably not the ones that maybe some of the other people like. I like his still lifes. I mean, of course, pictures of my daughter when she has clothes on. The ones without the clothes, I try to buy those up and keep them hidden.
The first year when I put up what I thought were family snapshots, including pictures of myself, they flew off the walls, and I couldn't believe it because I thought that they were pictures of my family that were so personal and just for myself and my family. And to see how universal they were, it was much more about everybody than just about us. My friend Octavio was a stalwart friend during my sight loss. He's someone who lost his sight unbelievably gracefully in 24 hours when he was 25.
For me, it was devastating, like losing your eyesight, because like I was totally, a visual person. My job was visual, and I was always detail oriented. But I mean, when you lose your eyesight, like now, you just start, your senses become much more acute. Your sense of hearing, your sense of smell, your sense of taste, everything, because even like your aura, like your body, you could feel when somebody's around you because you could feel them move around. It's really awkward. You become like a bat, actually.
I look to Octavio as an incredible inspiration at his joy and his sense of humor and how he was still experiencing everything in his life to the fullest.
I don't, and I think that other blind people, we don't get distracted by visual things now. Like we just go, we know what we want, we know what our passion is, and we just go and get it.
People try to imagine what it's like to not see much or to not see it all, and they can imagine it, but I don't think until you either have a blindfold on that you are not allowed to take off, or you actually do lose your sight, that you can possibly understand what the transition is like. So I photographed him and I together, and there was like an electric beam between us, and my favorite photograph from that session was a portrait of the two of us with our backs to the camera, sort of secretly having some sort of communion.
I went in for my first surgery for breast cancer last June, and the day that I went, Father Richard came to go with me, and he brought with him a little postcard-sized reproduction of that lovely photograph. And I was very frightened at the time. And the minute I looked at that, it spoke to me so strongly, and I got the feeling that there was something to hold on to. I wouldn't really be alone.
That really was a moving experience for me, to have that photograph take on a life of its own, beside and away from my story. She found and felt something in that photograph that gave her courage and some comfort.
I show it to other people, and I think they understand how I feel about it. Now it's going to be in there, and I know it's going to help us all.
And given to the glory of God, in thanksgiving for the recovery of Gloria Blank.
And when I finally met her, I couldn't wait to hug her and meet her because I felt like we already knew each other. It was so beautiful. The installation of that photograph was one of the most beautiful moments of my entire career.
There's something beyond sight that happens with John. And look at his photographs. I mean, it's impossible that you could not have more sight than John has and create those photographs. It's just not possible to understand how he does it.
One eye is completely blind, and the other eye I have 20% peripheral vision out of, which is extremely blurry. But it's enough for me to see colors beautifully, to see shapes, to know if it's sunny out or cloudy. It is really a tremendous, compared to being blind, it's a tremendous amount of sight. Now, I want you to understand that it's just this year, really, that I can do this by myself, like look through the camera like that, and that's a product of my mind adjusting to the little bit of sight that I have. I can see a photograph with a magnifying glass clearly. I can't see the same thing sitting 2 feet away from me. So the camera became something very magical. It took the place of my damaged retinas. So where no doctors could help me and no mechanical device that I could put on my face could help me, my camera became this magical instrument. That's why I don't feel like I can't see. I went from being a photographer who, like most photographers, you look, you see things that are beautiful and you photograph them. You find things with your eye, your photographic eye. But now I listen to so much literature, the great literature of the world, I'm able to absorb now in huge amounts at a time. I hear a line in one of those poems or in a piece of prose from Whitman or Emerson or Thoreau, and an image pops into my mind. I then I create that image in the studio, or I find it in the country.
I am always amazed by what John has managed to see. John came to my house for dinner one night, and to a dinner party. And first of all, I was feeling rather guilty because I always just have candles. And I remember thinking, oh God, this is really terrible of me. I probably should say to hell with the aesthetics of it. I should turn on the lights so that John can, you know, see whatever he can see. And then a few weeks later, John called me and asked if he could please have the party celebrating his new show at my apartment after the opening. And then he said, because I just love your apartment, and it's got in it everything I love. And I thought, how do you know that? But he does. He absolutely does.
So moved by the fact that you know, he'd lost his sight and that he'd learned to play the piano by ear. I've never had an experience like this, interviewing someone for the New York Times, when I come away, you know, moved to tears by the experience.
There's no more pure or perfect form of artistic expression than music. It can make you cry, it can make you move, it can make you fall asleep, it can make you jump up in the air. What other artwork can do that? It's like, you know, it's almost like those composers reached up into the sky and pulled down from some jet stream of consciousness and channeled those notes onto a piece of paper.
Not bad, huh? It's not bad at all. It sounds like you've been playing the organ.
When I got out of the hospital, I still felt like I had one foot on a banana peel and the other in a grave. Both being okay, neither wrong. That's a key thing to distinguish, is neither of those things are wrong. But I thought, well, why not do what I've always dreamt of doing and learn how to play some Bach on the piano?
He wanted to play Bach, you know what I mean? I said, hello, okay.
And I was so blessed by having a wonderful teacher in my life that was excited about the idea of conquering that challenge. You know, how do you learn to play from scratch without reading any music, which we did.
These pieces, people place them after 2, 3, 4 years of study. You know, we didn't do the kindergarten. We didn't do first grade. He started second, third grade. I said, why not? You know, this is for fun. You know, let's go. The worst that can happen is going to be a nightmare. But it happened, you know. It's kind of like was fabulous. Imagine being played in a harpsichord in the court of Marie Antoinette.
Strangely, even before that advent of the Walkman, where everyone could have their personal soundtrack while they walked around in their life, I always had a stream of music running through my head. All the great music that's been written in the world, which, you know, amazes me that people can think that way. I just took it to heart that it was written for me.
To find a way to do this, you know, was like a big challenge. I think we've done fantastic. And I think also had helped him, you know.
I didn't play an instrument when I was a child, really. Now playing the instrument is a fine form of meditation. No matter what's on my mind, while I'm concentrating on practicing, everything else slips away. I just take them all at one time, because otherwise I'd throw up. I have a very complicated and extensive program of medications that I take that start from the minute I wake up and end when I go to sleep every night. It tastes like 100 lemons in a glass. Not so bad. I get aggravated sometimes having to mix up this and put that with this, or go and have that checked and make sure I don't forget, and this has to be refrigerated and that doesn't, and it's really a lot of work. It's like a part-time job. But whenever I start to get aggravated, it's so easy to flash back to when there was nothing and people were just dying, and it was just accepted that if you came down with any opportunistic infection, you would be dead in a year and a half, because there was really no way to bolster the immune system. That snaps me back into a place of gratitude and reality very quickly.
John's made a whole career despite his illness and despite the disabilities that it's cost him. That's pretty inspiring. And he's done great, and he's survived. And he's not only survived, but he's thrived. And that's different than a lot of other patients.
People always ask me, how do you shave? How do you shave? How do you shave without looking? I get a better shave now by listening to my whiskers than I did before. I did a photograph about it called Self-Reliance. Because for a while I was in the hospital. I had people shave me, which is a nightmare. They were well intentioned, but you know how personal your face is, and people don't know how to get it right. Which is one of the reasons I got better. Is I could have gone home and lived with my mom, but I don't think I would have made it. Not because she's not wonderful, but because I wouldn't have had to do anything. And I saw so many of my friends get home health attendants and nurses and just stop taking care of themselves, and I just couldn't understand it for the life of me.
He just knows his environment so well that I don't think his lack of vision or sight inhibits him much in his territory at all. He really moves adeptly through his world.
Sometimes it's almost like a curse that I'm able to masquerade as a sighted person, but one of the things I vowed to myself when my sight changed is that I was not going to stare at the floor or stare at the wall or stare into space when I spoke to someone, whether I could see them or not. I was going to discern where their faces were, where their eyes were, and that's where I was going to look without looking away. My facial expressions and my connection with someone is very important to me. We'll make some pieces of this film that'll show people what I see. They'll see me walking around my home of 15 years, my studio of a dozen years, my neighborhood I've lived in for a decade. If they picked me up and put me in another neighborhood 10 blocks away in the evening, I would be lost. One of the most astonishing things that happened to me after I lost my sight was the discovery that I could not see in the dusk. One of my favorite times of day also became one of the most terrifying. The light that other people can see, and I can't really see, and if there's no moon, the night sky starts to darken, I'm lost.
Thank you so much. I'll see you guys soon. Okay, bye.
One night, my friends Jim and Gary dropped me off from having dinner and took off and left down the driveway, and I went and walked back towards the house without giving anything much thought. I turned down their offer of help, and I thought, don't be silly, why wouldn't I be able to find my own house in the middle of a field? And as a matter of fact, I couldn't find the house, and I walked right past the house. Then I walked back in the other direction, and the further I walked, the more lost I got. My heart was in my mouth and my stomach was in a knot, and the harder I tried to find the house, the worse it got. Finally, I felt some gravel under my feet, picked up some pebbles, and thought, well, I'll throw these pebbles around. I pitched some pebbles, turning in a circle, throwing a pebble at a time until I felt it strike something. I stumbled, I found the barn. At this point, I was in a complete state of panic. I walked a few more steps, and then a few more steps. Then I struck out from the barn, knowing full well that I would walk into the house, and started to pitch the stones again and follow the sound. Not afraid anymore whether or not I was going to break a window. By the time I found my way to the steps, I was completely mentally drained and exhausted and just broke down and lay down on the steps and cried. I called the electrician the next day to start hooking up some lights that could be left on the porch so I would never be lost in my front yard again. I was already fairly well established and had probably 15 shows when I met Dan and had a fair idea of what I was doing, but what I didn't have was someone perfect to work with. My studio was so quiet, and he was so quiet, the perfect person to have there with me to help me interpret my ideas.
Okay. No one's ever can you accuse me of not having a sense of humor about all of this. What does it look like, Dan?
Let's see. Patrick, touch this way. Yeah. Okay, that does it.
The most recent photograph that we've worked on is called The Wound Dresser, which is a poem from Walt Whitman's book called Drum Taps, which is about his experience in the Civil War. I'm still exercising moments from the hospital like that out of me, and I had my friend Patrick wrapping a gauze bandage around my head in a Civil War style, which refers back to my stroke, where my head was split in two with what felt like an axe, and my blindness with one of the bandages covering my eye.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. You know, I'm the camera operator. I'm definitely not the artist. The ideas, the creativity, the artistry is all him. And he just needs someone to help him work the camera, make sure it's in focus. And that's what I'm there to do.
I try to give him as much credit as I can for everything that I do, because we work in tandem. And it's so nice, because before I was so singular and I was the photographer, and now it's much more of a corporate effort, and I love working like that. It's really enjoyable, and I try to never have him feel like he's working for me, but with me. When I got out of the hospital and I knew I was going to make a show, I went immediately to my knowledge of the history of photography, and I thought, what would be the easiest process for me to do? And I knew that cyanotype was extremely easy. It's a non-electric process, which really appeals to my love of the past, and the idea of being able to make prints without electricity appealed to me greatly. But really what appealed to me the most was it was very low toxicity. I did not have to go into a dark room.
I need to wear sunscreen with the process, which is usually not what someone who works in a dark room has to do. So it's pretty nice. Sometimes it's a little too much ultraviolet for me. I'm fair-skinned.
It's two chemicals, ferrous iron salts, mixed together in distilled water, painted with a paintbrush on rag paper, nice archival watercolor paper, sandwiching it together with the negative and exposing it to the light of the sun.
I'm thinking that this exposure is done. It's a test print, so sometimes there's a trial and error to it. But this looks like it should be pretty good. After exposure, you can see the image imprinted on the paper already, which was, you know, when we pulled it out of the print frame, you could see that something was going on there. After the exposure is made, it's pretty simple. You just rinse it off in water.
I was a little sad that the pictures had to be blue. That's just a byproduct of the process. And I thought, well, I'll just put this show of blue photographs up, and this is the best that I could do, and maybe next year I could make them a different color or try something else. I'll be a little more together next year. But what I didn't realize was that color has a profound impact on people emotionally.
You go into the gallery and you stand in front of the work and you relate to it almost as though you're a child again, or as though this photograph captures something which is very specific to you, which you felt that no one else shared. And so you look at this photograph and you feel as though he somehow had insight into your feelings, or he shot this photograph for you. So you have a really reverential moment in front of these beautiful pieces.
You know, it's funny, when I showed this to Robert the first time, he said he couldn't look at it.
Isn't that funny? You want to know what? I got the same feeling, honey.
It wasn't supposed to be like that,
but
that's
so
the way
beautiful.
it turned out.
It's so beautiful.
Somebody mentioned something to me once at a show which I loved, and they said when a Buddhist reaches the highest state of meditation, they see something called the blue pearl. And he said that's what the color reminded him of. How exciting. Oh my God. 5 years later, my second book. I'm going to open up the book to a random page and have you read it to me.
Okay. Okay. Which?
I don't know. I have to find just the right random page.
Like all the other old churches I've been in, they inspire quiet and reflection. I feel as if the old walls, even more so the ground that places of worship are built on, are soaked with the history of human beings. That's pretty potent.
That's so beautiful. Tears come to my eyes.
As the first one randomly chosen.
I've never written a book before.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've ever had anything published, ever, of my own writing. I haven't written anything since high school.
Yeah, you did a good job. Postlude. In my front parlor, I'm playing my pump organ. The instrument was built for a much smaller organist. My knees won't slip underneath the keyboard, so I have to lean my chair back to play it. How did it feel to go from being fully sighted with 20/20 vision to having almost no sight?
I developed a feeling of transparency. I have photographed myself as a transparent figure, particularly at the farm, because there I often feel like an ephemeral creature, a ghost unable to see clearly. I call pictures of me in this state of mind spirit photographs.
The Clandestine Mind is a photograph of my feelings about not being able to read. Even though I have access to all the great literature of the world through books on tape and people reading to me, it is not the same as settling down in front of the fire or in bed at night before I go to sleep with the printed word. I wanted to show my feeling of loss, so I created a spirit photograph of me sitting on the stairs with a beautiful old book, and it's truly just a picture about the loss of the ability to be able to read myself and how much I miss it. I think that's a blessing that we take for granted on a daily, moment-by-moment basis, the ability to look at a symbol on a piece of paper and have it turn into a thought and a picture in our minds. I lie abstracted and hear beautiful. I lie abstracted and hear beautiful tales. There's the house right back there. Yay! Grass is cut. Yay! Out you go, June. I just feel like I was accidentally placed in the wrong time and I'm making the best of it. I'd like someday to reconstruct an 18th century house somewhere on the property, way back at the edge of the woods or something that has nothing in it at all. You know, perfectly pure house. I just feel more comfortable. There's not really an explanation for that, but I look out at the road and I like to imagine that the telephone lines are telegraph lines, not phone lines, and it's very easy to imagine the road with dirt instead of pavement. And, you know, I'm a student of the past. In 1986, I tried to buy a studio for myself, and I realized for the cost of it, I could buy a house with trees and ground and a place to have a garden, stars, the moon, farm animals, you know, just be here in the quiet, away from all the hubbub in the city and all the people and noise, and everyone thought I was crazy to buy a house so young and saddle myself with a mortgage, but I think instinctively I might have known that my sight was going to change, or I might not have been here because I got to enjoy it for 8 or 9 years before my health changed. So when I got here nearly blind, I could see the house in my mind's eye, and I knew where every nail and every step, every bump, I had examined the property in great detail already, so there was nothing for me to get to know. Also, what I hadn't expected is the house turned into a more beautiful studio than anything I could have imagined, because every room has beautiful light, and just the quietude and the surroundings inspired my work in a way that I couldn't possibly have expected. It's sort of like a vortex where the sky touches the ground for me. I really feel connected to the earth and to the stars, and it's a really the most peaceful place that I know in the world. It was exasperating for a lot of the months that went by and the years where I didn't have a partner, and I really felt that it was because of my eyesight. I think that having AIDS now or being HIV positive is not a reason not to find love in your life. There's love before, during, and after any kind of illness.
Well, here, this is for you. I'm putting it in your hand.
Small. Lawrence is an exceptionally handsome, wonderful man. Wow, what is it? Oh, thank you. I feel like I have the first truly meaningful adult relationship of my life that was not based on what someone looked like. It was based on what he was like inside. And that's something that I heard over the phone first. It wasn't someone that I picked out of a crowd because of what they looked like.
Just give her a gentle rub down. You know, I read once that
you just changed her smile to a frown.
With John's low vision, I have to express more verbally than I ever did before. Because John can't see facial expressions very well. He can't see when I'm hurt or if I roll my eyes or if I'm being sarcastic with I can't do that anymore. I have to take him by the hands. We have to talk and look at one another and hear one another.
And then there's a dark,
it's like
dark
faux
green
oak.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful?
It's fantastic. It's a beautiful door.
We don't face anything that different than any other couple faces. It's just much more in your face when you have HIV.
It's important that people have a reason to live, and my reasons to live are changing as I go along. With John, I look forward to so many things.
I don't see any obstacles. I try not to think of what they might be. Why think of what might go wrong? In my mind, that's a way to create things happening.
Towel. Thank you. Tail of squirrel nutkin.
Okay.
This is a tale about a tale that belonged to a little red squirrel, and his name was Nutkin. He had a brother called Twinkleberry. And a great many cousins. They lived in a wood at the edge of a lake.
Everything has been such a surprise and such a mystery so far. There's no reason to think that at some point they'll be able to totally reconstitute the immune system. Anything is possible. If I'm still here and I'm having the joyful life and this feeling strong enough to do everything and more that I did before, there's really no reason to think that someday I may not have to take all of these things. You have to be like a tree that can bend all the way down to the ground without breaking. I feel like that's what I did. I bent so far down to where I was almost dead, lost most of my sight, but didn't break. I just sprang back up because I allowed myself to have the experience. People say I look great, you look so young, you look fine, you don't look any different, but I do look different. I can see it around my eyes. There's a wear and a sadness in my gaze that was not there before. And it might be imperceptible to people who don't know me, even people who are very close to me, but it's very clear to me. I have had a profound change in my being. I'm still a stickler for detail, and I like things to be perfect as they can be, but perfect has a very different definition now. You know, I realized early on that when I had less control over the camera, when I wasn't looking through it myself, occasionally a pinky or a toe or a little bit of something that I would have kept in gets cut out. But just how I had to learn how to live without all of my sight. It was very easy to look at the picture and say, it's perfect just the way it is. I've gotten more done in my life with that frame of mind than any other time in my life. Okay, all right.
You want my glasses?
No, these are good.
You're going to sign the bottom, not the top.
Yeah, but I'm going to sign my name first, up above it, and then I'm going to dedicate it to you underneath. That's the way I did it.
Oh, okay, okay.
For my brother Rose, who has helped me through so many of life's evening hours.
I blessed this book with holy water.
Oh, dear God, did you put holy water on it?
It's in your hand that signed it.
Thank you.
It's not wrong that I lost my sight. There's nothing the matter with it. I don't know what more I can possibly say or share to convince people that it doesn't feel wrong and that I've had a more wonderful time and been more acutely aware of the beauty and the wonder in my life and everyone's life around me than since my sight changed. I constantly try to remind my mom, who's always wondering about if there's going to be something to fix my sight. Something is going to change, you know, it's so sad. I wish, she just says to me all the time, I would give you both my eyes if I could, and I always tell her I don't want them because I have my own, like, special eye that I don't need her eyes. I would never take them because I wouldn't want to interrupt this experience that I'm having.
Well, you know what, you guys? It's extremely difficult. I've never accompanied somebody before.
No, I think what happened was when Bach wrote the partita, but then Gounod changed it and added a couple of things in there, and the Ave Maria was done when Gounod changed Bach.
Right.
So we're dealing with
it's
Bach
not-
here, so we're missing something.
Something's missing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like me.
But I've got